The question today is this. Things aren't great at home, and I'm growing closer to a work colleague. At work, I feel listened to and cared for, and at home, I just feel ignored. Why would an affair be wrong if it could make me happy?
This question comes from Philadelphia. And Philadelphia may be the home of the Liberty Bell, but it doesn't give you the liberty to step out on your marriage. Let's examine why things may be different at work. The person at the office, they look good, they smell good, and they're really, really nice. Why is that? It's because they're at work. That's what they get paid to do. You come to work after having a fight with your spouse, and the other person, just being nice, listens with a sympathetic ear. And it may happen several times over time. And then they begin to share about how rotten their spouse is. And before you know it, you're commiserating with one another, and you've crossed the line. Pro tip here for married couples. You can't cross the line if you stay away and aware. Far away as possible from the line. Look at it like this. You may come right up to the line, toes touching, right where you know you won't fall over into an affair. But the other person may already themselves cross their line already.
Yeah, that's true. You know, it might start innocently on social media even. Maybe someone from your past reconnects with you or you reconnect with them, and it seems inviting to exchange that information, about the family and what you've been doing all these years, which then can lead to information about yourself. And that might seem exciting. Of course, you'll never go too far, right? Or maybe some new person hits you up in your DMs and it's like instant flirtation and it's really exciting. And while those scenarios don't always lead to trouble, they all have the potential of walking you right to the edge of trouble. Why? Because you find yourself starting to concentrate more on this other person, and it often leads to giving more attention to this other person. And your person, your husband or your wife, starts to look less interesting than more interesting than your spouse. So pro tip for couples. Commit yourself to almost never communicating with the opposite sex without including your spouse on the communication.
It's a good rule of thumb.
Yes. If saying what you are writing to that other person of interest out loud to your spouse, your mother, or your minister would embarrass you, then it's wrong and it's dangerous.
I agree with you, Debster. There is a couple who we are great friends with. We're involved in the marriage ministry together. And she and I cook, and we like to share new recipes with one another.
Mm-hmm. Good ones.
But we never email or text each other without including one or both of our spouses, because you just can't be too careful. Guys, another tip is you never give another lady a full front hug. I always hug with a side hug, one arm. I don't want it to seem too personal. And also, because of the proliferation of abuse in our society, I never initiate a hug with a lady because I don't know their background. A hug from me potentially can be seen as aggressive, threatening, or misunderstood.
Yeah, also you can see that you can set aside some suspicion if you have a full access to each other's phones, emails, and social media. It's healthy to share your passwords with your spouse.
Yes.
Let me give you some examples of how I avoid suspicion of impropriety. When I worked at a church locally here, and when I worked out at Dallas Baptist University, I would make sure that if a male came into my office, the door was always remained open, because my office at DBU did not have a window, nor did my office at the church have a window. So oftentimes the pastor and I, we had this kind of unwritten rule that he would stand in the doorway of his office and I would sit behind my desk. We always had at least a desk between us. If we thought we were going to have a long conversation, we might go out into the sanctuary. He would sit a few pews down. I would sit across the aisle in another pew, and we'd have conversations that way. And out at DBU, I didn't have male students in my office without my door open.
I am certainly glad that you acted that way. I found that to be very respectful, because it gave me a peace of mind. Also, to help you, when I was working for an industrial supply company, sometimes I had to ride with representatives to go see clients, and some of those representatives were women. And when that situation arose, I would always let Debster know ahead of time so that she would know that when I got into the vehicle with a female rep, I would also call her on the phone just to let her know how my day was going and who I was riding with, because I wanted Debster to know and be assured that everything was on the up and up. Particularly if someone called her and said, "Hey, I saw Greg with this woman in the car." Also, it set a boundary between me and the female rep, because by talking to my wife, that gave proper impression of that I was married and that I was enjoying my marriage and that nothing was going to come between me and my marriage. And that just can't be, you just can't be too careful.
That's right. You do have to be careful. I know it seems silly in this day and age when everybody's super familiar with one another and friendly, but you need to do this. It's
true.
important. And if you set that standard early in your marriage, you won't have the kind of problems of, if I'm not feeling really good about myself this week, then I begin to look at things like it's suspicious.
I agree.
So consider this. We find in Scripture that children of God are called to be holy, called to holy living, and not called just to be happy. I know there's a lot of conversation in society these days about God just wants me to be happy. But holiness is an attribute we develop when we seek after God. It's really part of our sanctification process. And if you think about it, happiness depends on something happening. Happiness is a feeling. And you know, all of our feelings are pretty fleeting.
Yes,
Plus,
they are.
our feelings can be pretty deceptive. You know, I may say that I love cake and I may say that I love Greg, but how is he going to know the difference? You know, it can be a little deceptive.
Most likely, if you don't protect yourself and you are committing yourself to seeking your spouse in the way that you act with others of the opposite sex, then you could be walking towards a disconnection, a forerunner of divorce. Take a moment and consider how divorce will affect your children, the people that you influence and that are around you, like family and friends, and just all others around you, maybe neighbors or just people that you don't think are watching your life, but they maybe see what's happening. And consider, if you will, this thought: divorce is like the death of a small civilization. There's no one left unscathed. As believers, we're instructed to leave our parents, cleave to our spouse, and weave a life together, just like a piece of fabric. And when you have that fabric and you try to pull it apart, you can't get every strand apart and be just like it was before it was woven together.
Right.
And divorce is like ripping of the fabric, and now you have all these ragged edges that can never be put back together. In Matthew 19, it says, "You are now one flesh, and what God has joined together, let no one separate." And that includes you. Some versions say divide or put asunder or tear apart.
So, what's the bottom line? Well, we should seek to be holy, right? Period. To honor our marriage and to honor our spouse and God. And in so doing, we do honor God.
Yeah.
Now, if you've received any value today, please like and subscribe.
And if you would have a question you would like it to be answered, please reply in the comments. We're Debster and Greg, and there is hope in your marriage. We love y'all. We want the best for you, because when you have a better marriage,
Your kids will have a better life.